Have you ever walked into a store and felt judged by the way you looked? Imagine being treated as if you didn't belong. What would you do? Watch the video to find out what happens when an unsuspecting black woman walks into a luxury boutique only to face biased treatment and prejudice from the staff. The story highlights the injustices that unfold in spaces of privilege. Elena Carter, a poised and confident entrepreneur, had spent years building her reputation and her empire. Known for her sharp business acumen and her unwavering commitment to inclusivity, Elena had recently acquired a renowned luxury store chain, fulfilling a lifelong dream she once thought was beyond her reach. The acquisition was deeply personal for her. As a child, Elena would walk past the grand windows of luxury boutiques with her mother, dreaming of a day when she could step inside and not feel out of place. Her mother, a hard-working nurse who juggled multiple jobs to make ends meet, always instilled in Elena the belief that dreams could be realized through hard work, determination, and staying true to one's values. "One day you'll have more than you ever imagined," her mother would say, her voice tinged with both hope and certainty. Those words became Elena's guiding mantra. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, Elena was no stranger to adversity. She learned early on how society often judged people by their appearance or their socioeconomic status, rather than their character or potential. These experiences shaped her, fueling her determination to succeed and create spaces where everyone, regardless of background, felt welcome. Elena pursued her education with laser-focused ambition, eventually earning a business degree from a prestigious university. From there, she climbed the corporate ladder with grace and grit, eventually establishing her own successful company. The luxury chain she had just acquired was more than a business venture. It was a symbol of her journey, a testament to how far she had come. On the morning of her visit to one of the flagship stores, Elena felt a mix of pride and anticipation. She had decided to visit without fanfare, dressed simply in a crisp white blouse and tailored slacks. This was intentional. Elena wanted to experience the store as an ordinary customer, not as the high-profile businesswoman whose name had recently made headlines. Her decision wasn't just about humility. It was also a way to assess how her staff treated every person who walked through the doors. Elena believed that the heart of any successful business lay in its culture, and she wanted to ensure hers was built on respect and fairness. As she approached the store, Elena took in its grandeur. The polished marble floors gleamed under the morning sunlight, streaming through the large glass windows. Inside, the displays were immaculate, showcasing designer handbags, sparkling jewelry, and other luxury items that seemed to whisper exclusivity. For a brief moment, Elena was transported back to her childhood, standing outside a similar store with her nose pressed against the glass, longing for a future she could only imagine. Now, as the owner of this establishment, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and responsibility. Upon entering the store, Elena was greeted by the intoxicating scent of expensive perfumes, mingled with the faint hum of classical music playing softly in the background. She moved gracefully, taking her time to admire the displays. Her eyes landed on a handbag that instantly stirred a memory. It was the same design she had admired as a young girl, a timeless piece she had once dreamed of owning. Standing there now, with a journey coming full circle, Elena couldn't help but smile. The handbag wasn't just a luxury item. It was a symbol of perseverance, resilience, and triumph over the obstacles she had faced. As she moved deeper into the store, Elena noticed the staff bustling about, attending to customers with varying degrees of enthusiasm. She observed their interactions closely, taking mental notes. Most of the employees seemed professional and courteous, but a few, including the manager Derek Lawson, carried an air of superiority that didn't sit well with her. Elena believed that true luxury wasn't just about the products being sold. It was about the experience and how people were treated. She wanted every customer, regardless of their background or appearance, to feel valued and respected in her stores. Derek Lawson, the store manager, spotted Elena from across the room. Dressed modestly, she didn't fit the stereotypical image of a high-end shopper. He eyed her with thinly veiled suspicion, his expression shifting from curiosity to disdain as he made quick assumptions about her. In his mind, Elena was out of place, a window shopper at best, someone wasting time in a store meant for serious buyers. Derek Lawson prided himself on being able to read customers, a skill he often boasted about to his colleagues. To him, Elena was nothing more than a distraction, someone who didn't deserve his attention. Unaware of Derek Lawson's growing hostility, Elena continued browsing, her mind drifting between admiration for the craftsmanship of the items and memories of her past. She moved with quiet confidence, her demeanor calm yet purposeful. But as she approached another display, she became aware of Derek Lawson's presence. He had positioned himself nearby, watching her every move with an intensity that was hard to ignore. At first, Elena brushed it off, assuming he was simply doing his job. However, as his scrutiny grew more overt, she couldn't help but feel a familiar pang of discomfort, the same feeling she had experienced countless times as a young girl, being judged and underestimated because of her appearance. Derek Lawson eventually approached her, his tone polite but laced with condescension. "Good morning," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you find something?" Elena returned his smile warmly. "Thank you, but I'm just browsing," she replied, her tone gracious yet firm. Derek Lawson's smile faltered slightly, and he didn't move away. Instead, he lingered, his gaze narrowing as he scrutinized her. "You know," he said after a moment, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "you might find something more in your price range at another store. This one caters to a very specific clientele." Elena's smile faded, but she maintained her composure. She was no stranger to such microaggressions, and had learned long ago not to let them rattle her. Instead of responding, she moved to another section of the store, determined to focus on her purpose and not let Derek Lawson's assumptions ruin her day. But Derek Lawson wasn't done. His tone grew louder, ensuring nearby customers could hear him. "People who just want to look but aren't serious buyers. It can be disruptive." At this, Elena stopped and turned to face him. Her expression remained calm, but there was a steely determination in her eyes. "Is that what you think I am?" she asked quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made Derek Lawson hesitate for a brief moment. He recovered quickly, folding his arms and smirking. "I've been in this business long enough to know who's serious and who isn't," he said smugly. The humiliation stung, but Elena refused to let it show. She met his gaze head-on, her voice steady as she replied, "I don't believe it's your job to make that judgment." The exchange caught the attention of other customers, who began whispering among themselves Yemen. Some discreetly pulled out their phones to record the interaction, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Elena stood her ground, unshaken by the mounting tension. She wasn't just defending herself. She was standing up against a deeply ingrained culture of prejudice and exclusion, one she was determined to change. Derek Lawson's loud accusations didn't just disrupt Elena's quiet browsing. They drew the attention of nearly everyone in the store. Customers who had been casually admiring displays or chatting with sales associates now turned their attention to the unfolding confrontation. The door. Customers who had been casually admiring displays or chatting with sales associates now turned their attention to the unfolding confrontation. The atmosphere, once defined by muted luxury and quiet indulgence, shifted to a charged hum of whispers and sidelong glances. Some customers looked uneasy, unsure how to react, while others pulled out their phones to record the scene. For few, it was an awkward distraction. For others, it was an opportunity to capture a moment that felt significant. Among the onlookers was Victoria Langley, a well-dressed woman who epitomized the store's stereotypical clientele. In her mid-40s, she exuded wealth and privilege, with her tailored beige pantsuit and a handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Victoria Langley had been gliding effortlessly through the store, browsing with the air of someone who assumed every item was hers for the taking. Unlike Elena, who admired the merchandise with a sense of gratitude and reflection, Victoria Langley viewed the displays with detachment, as if their only purpose was to affirm her status. When Derek Lawson began harassing Elena, Victoria Langley barely noticed at first. She was too preoccupied with a sparkling diamond necklace displayed under glass. But as Derek Lawson's voice grew louder, the tension in the room became impossible to ignore. Victoria Langley glanced toward the commotion, her expression one of mild disinterest. To her, this was just another scene in a luxury store, someone being told they didn't belong, someone else asserting their authority. It was a dynamic she had seen before, and one that rarely involved her. And yet, as the crowd's attention shifted toward Elena and Derek Lawson, Victoria Langley saw an opportunity. With the store manager focused entirely on Elena, the staff distracted, and the other customers engrossed in the unfolding drama, the store's meticulous order began to unravel. Victoria Langley's sharp eyes darted to the jewelry display. Her fingers brushed against the cool glass as she feigned admiration for the diamond necklace. She glanced around, ensuring no one was watching her too closely. Then, with a fluid motion honed by practice, she lifted the necklace from its display and slipped it into her designer handbag. Her movements were precise and deliberate, her expression calm and unbothered. It was a stark contrast to the chaos brewing just a few feet away. As Derek Lawson continued to berate Elena, accusing her of loitering and being out of place, Victoria Langley moved to another display. This time she admired an elegant bracelet adorned with precious gemstones. Again her fingers lingered for a moment before deftly tucking the item into her bag. The confidence with which she executed her theft was almost unnerving. To Victoria Langley, this wasn't a risk. It was a calculated act born of entitlement and a certainty that no one would dare suspect her. Elena, however, noticed. Even in the midst of Derek Lawson's hostility, her sharp gaze caught Victoria Langley's movements. Elena's years of experience had taught her to read a room, to observe people and their actions with a keen awareness. While she didn't immediately react to Victoria Langley's theft, it didn't escape her attention. Elena stored the observation in the back of her mind, knowing that the moment to address it would come. For now, her focus remained on standing her ground against Derek Lawson. Derek Lawson, oblivious to Victoria Langley's actions, continued his tirade. "We get a lot of window shoppers here," he repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. "People who just want to look, but don't actually buy anything. It's bad for business." His words were loud enough for the nearby customers to hear, and Elena could feel their eyes on her. Some seemed sympathetic, while others appeared uncomfortable or unsure of what to think. Elena stood her ground, refusing to let Derek Lawson's words rattle her. She met his gaze, her expression calm but unyielding. "Is that what you think I am?" she asked, her voice steady and composed. Derek Lawson smirked, crossing his arms in a show of confidence. "I've been in this business long enough to know who's serious and who isn't," he said smugly, clearly believing he had the upper hand. But Elena didn't back down. Instead, she replied firmly, "I don't believe it's your job to make that judgment." The exchange created a ripple effect among the onlookers. Some murmured in agreement with Elena's calm assertion, while others remained silent, unsure of where they stood. Victoria Langley, meanwhile, continued her quiet theft, slipping another item into her bag with the same practiced ease. To her, the drama between Elena and Derek Lawson was a convenient distraction, a shield that allowed her to operate unnoticed. But Elena's sharp eyes flicked toward Victoria Langley once more, her expression unreadable. Elena chose not to address it yet, knowing that timing would be everything. The tension in the store reached a boiling point when Derek Lawson threatened to call the police. "If you don't leave now, I'll have no choice but to involve the authorities," he said, his voice sharp and final. Elena, unfazed, crossed her arms and said calmly, "Go ahead." Her response caught Derek Lawson off guard, and for a brief moment he hesitated, but his pride wouldn't allow him to back down. He pulled out his phone and began dialing, determined to assert his authority. As Derek Lawson made the call, Elena remained composed, her confidence unwavering. She had faced worse challenges in her life, and had always emerged stronger. This moment, she realized, was about more than her. It was about standing up against a culture of prejudice and exclusion that had no place in the world she was building. Elena knew she was being watched, not just by the customers in the store, but by countless others who would see the footage being recorded on phones. Her every move, every word mattered. Meanwhile, Victoria Langley continued her quiet exit strategy. With her handbag now noticeably fuller, she began inching toward the store's exit. Her steps were measured, her expression serene. She moved as if she had every right to be there, confident that no one would question her. To Victoria Langley, the idea of being caught was almost laughable. She had crafted an image of respectability and wealth, and she relied on that image to shield her from suspicion. But Elena's gaze followed her, sharp and focused. Victoria Langley's calm demeanor didn't fool her for a second. The situation reached a breaking point as the store's glass doors swung open and two uniformed police officers entered. The atmosphere in the store shifted once again, the tension thickening as everyone turned to watch. Derek Lawson stepped forward eagerly, his confidence bolstered by the arrival of the authorities. "Officers," he said, gesturing toward Elena, "thank you for coming. This woman has been loitering and causing a disturbance. She refuses to leave, and I believe she may escalate further." The officers, a tall man with a commanding presence and a petite woman with a stern expression, turned their attention to Elena. The taller officer spoke first, his tone firm. "Mom, we're going to need you to leave the premises." Elena frowned, her calm demeanor showing the first cracks of frustration. "Excuse me," she said, "but you haven't even asked for my side of the story." The male officer took a step closer, his tone leaving little room for argument. "The manager has made it clear that you're no longer welcome here. Please leave now, or we'll have to escort you out." Elena remained still, her eyes shifting between the officers and Derek Lawson. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a sleek black car pulled up outside the store. The car's doors opened and two sharply dressed men and a woman stepped out. But before she could speak, a sleek black car pulled up outside the store. The car's doors opened and two sharply dressed men and a woman stepped out, their presence commanding immediate attention. Without hesitation, they entered the store and walked directly toward Elena. For the first time, Derek Lawson's confident demeanor faltered. His expression shifted from arrogance to confusion, and then to panic as he realized the truth. Elena Carter wasn't just a customer. She was the owner of the store. Stepping into the store were two sharply dressed men, their tailored suits immaculate, followed by a woman exuding authority and elegance. Her tailored pantsuit and confident stride spoke volumes. This was no ordinary customer or entourage. These individuals had a purpose, and their presence commanded immediate respect. As they approached Elena, it became clear to everyone that something significant was about to happen. The taller of the two men smiled warmly and said, "Miss Carter, sorry we're late. Are you ready for the walkthrough?" His voice carried a tone of familiarity and respect, one that starkly contrasted with the hostility Elena had faced moments before. For the first time since the confrontation began, Derek Lawson's confidence wavered. His face, previously flushed with arrogance, drained of color as the realization hit him. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He glanced at Elena, then at the two men trying to process what was happening. The whispers among the customers grew louder, some gasping as the pieces began to fall into place. Phones were still recording, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. Elena turned to Derek Lawson, her calm composure now carrying an undeniable air of authority. "I'm Elena Carter," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "the new owner of this store." The room fell completely silent. Even the faint hum of the classical music in the background seemed to fade away. Customers who had been watching with vague curiosity now stared in disbelief, while the store employees froze in their tracks. For Derek Lawson, it was as if the ground had shifted beneath him. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by panic. "You're the owner?" he stammered, his voice barely audible. "That's correct," Elena replied coolly, her eyes never leaving his. "And I've been watching how you run things here. I must say it's been enlightening." Before Derek Lawson could stammer out a response, Elena raised her hand, silencing him. Her gaze shifted momentarily toward Victoria Langley, who had been inching closer to the exit, her bag noticeably fuller. "Before we continue," Elena said, her tone sharp, "you might want to check that customer's bag." She gestured toward Victoria Langley, who froze mid-step. The spotlight now turned to her, and the room's collective attention followed Elena's gaze. Victoria Langley's confidence, so evident, crumbled instantly. Her hand tightened around the strap of her designer handbag, and her face flushed with panic. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't do anything." But Elena didn't waver. Her voice was firm and steady. "I saw you slip a bracelet and a necklace into your bag," while the manager here was busy harassing me. I think it's time we address that." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Customers who had previously been focused on Elena and Derek Lawson now turned their attention to Victoria Langley. Whispers filled the air, and several people raised their phones higher to ensure they captured every detail of the unfolding scene. "She was stealing the whole time," one customer murmured, their voice a mix of shock and indignation, and they were too busy targeting Elena to even notice. Derek Lawson, now visibly sweating, looked at Victoria Langley in disbelief. "What?" he sputtered, his voice cracking. "She doesn't seem like the type to." His words trailed off as Elena's sharp gaze turned back to him. "The type?" She repeated, her tone icy. "You mean, the type you assume is innocent based on how they look? While I, the owner of this store, was treated like I don't belong?" Before Derek Lawson could respond, Elena addressed the security guards who had entered moments earlier. "Check her bag," she instructed calmly but firmly. The guards hesitated for a split second, glancing at Victoria Langley, who clutched her bag protectively. "You have no right to search my belongings," Victoria Langley protested, her voice rising in desperation. But the guards stepped forward, their expression serious. "Ma'am," one of them said firmly, "we'll need to verify this. Please hand over your bag." Victoria Langley's eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, but the weight of the stares and the murmurs from the crowd left her cornered. Finally she relented, her hands trembling as she handed over the bag. The guards opened it, and within seconds their expressions hardened. From the depths of the expensive handbag, they pulled out a sparkling diamond necklace and an elegant bracelet, both with their price tags still attached. The room erupted into gasps and murmurs of disbelief. "I can't believe it," one customer whispered. "She was stealing the whole time, and no one even noticed." Victoria Langley tried to stammer out an excuse. "I was going to pay for those," she said, her voice shaking. "I just forgot to tell anyone." But her words fell flat. The evidence was undeniable. Elena turned back to Derek Lawson, her expression unyielding. "This," she said, gesturing toward Victoria Langley and the stolen items, "is what happens when you let prejudice cloud your judgment. While you were busy targeting me, a paying customer and the owner of this store, the real thief was walking out with your merchandise." Derek Lawson opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss for words. His arrogance and confidence had been stripped away, leaving only shame and fear. The guards escorted Victoria Langley to the back office, her protests growing weaker as she disappeared from view. The customers in the store buzzed with conversation, many expressing their support for Elena and their disgust at what had unfolded. As Victoria Langley was led away, Elena turned back to Derek Lawson. Her tone was calm but carried the weight of finality. "This is the culture you've created," she said. "A culture of judgment, exclusion, and incompetence. That ends today." The room, still filled with murmurs, fell silent again as Elena's words hung in the air. "And as for you," Elena continued, her gaze locking on to Derek Lawson, "your time here is done." Derek Lawson's eyes widened in panic. You can't fire me," he stammered weakly. "I was just doing my job." Elena raised an eyebrow, her expression unwavering. "Yours," she said, "was to treat every customer with respect, to ensure that this store represents the values of fairness and inclusivity. Instead, you chose to let your bias dictate your actions, humiliating a customer and tarnishing this store's reputation in the process. You're fired." The announcement was met with applause from the customers and even some of the staff. Derek Lawson, his face pale and his shoulders slumped, had no choice but to leave. Security escorted him out, his once confident demeanor now reduced to utter humiliation. As he exited the store, the energy in the room shifted. There was a sense of justice, of a wrong being righted, and Elena stood at the center of it all, calm and resolute. As Derek Lawson was escorted out of the store, shoulders slumped and face flushed with humiliation, the atmosphere in the store began to shift. The customers who had gathered around murmured among themselves, their earlier discomfort giving way to admiration for Elena's calm yet commanding presence. The applause that had followed Derek Lawson's dismissal began to subside, leaving behind a sense of anticipation. Elena wasn't done. There was still unfinished business to address, and everyone in the store could feel it. The two uniformed police officers, who had arrived earlier, stood stiffly near the entrance, their confidence visibly shaken. Just moments ago, they had been prepared to escort Elena out of the store without so much as asking for her side of the story, relying solely on Derek Lawson's biased accusations. Now they realized they had made a serious mistake. The taller officer, who had spoken most authoritatively, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Elena's gaze. The shorter officer, a petite woman with a stern expression that had softened into unease, glanced at her partner, clearly unsure of what to do next. Elena, ever composed, turned her attention toward the officers. Her gaze was steady, her expression calm but firm. "Officers," she began, her voice carrying the weight of someone who knew she was in the right. "I'd like to understand why, when you arrived, you immediately took Derek Lawson's word at face value. You didn't ask me a single question. You didn't investigate the situation. Instead, you were ready to remove me from the premises based on nothing more than his assumptions." The taller officer cleared his throat, his discomfort evident. "Ma'am," he started, his voice faltering. "We were responding to a call from the manager," he said. Elena raised a hand, cutting him off. "I know exactly what he said," she replied sharply, "and you believed him without hesitation. You saw me standing here, calm and composed, and instead of assessing the situation, you chose to act on his bias. Why is that?" Her tone wasn't accusatory, but it carried a weight that made the officers visibly uneasy. The shorter officer, her voice quieter now, stepped forward slightly. "We were just following protocol," she said, though her words lacked conviction. "The manager asked us to remove you and we—" "Protocol?" Elena interrupted, her voice tinged with incredulity. "Does protocol not include hearing both sides of a story? Does protocol allow for assumptions to override fairness and justice? Because if that's the case, your protocol is flawed." The murmurs among the customers grew louder. Some nodded in agreement, while others continued to record the interaction, recognizing the significance of what was happening. Elena's words were resonating far beyond the walls of the store. They were addressing a systemic issue that many had experienced or witnessed in their own lives. Before either officer could respond, Elena pulled out her phone and dialed number. The room fell silent again as she held the phone to her ear. After a few rings, a deep authoritative voice answered on the other end. "Chief Alexander Grant," Elena said, her voice steady. "This is Elena Carter. I'm at one of my stores, and I think you need to come down here." The weight of her words hung in the air. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Chief Alexander Grant," someone murmured. "She knows the chief of police?" Within minutes, the sound of a vehicle pulling up outside broke the tense silence. A sleek black SUV parked just beyond the glass doors, and the murmurs in the store grew louder as the vehicle's door opened. Chief Alexander Grant, a tall man with a commanding presence, stepped out and walked briskly into the store. Dressed in a crisp uniform adorned with medals of service, he exuded authority and respect. The officers straightened instinctively as he entered, their postures stiffening under his piercing gaze. "Miss Carter," the chief said as he approached her, his tone respectful. "What seems to be the problem?" Elena gestured toward the two officers. "Chief, these officers responded to a call here and immediately sided with the manager without asking me any questions. They were prepared to remove me from the premises based solely on his biased account, without any investigation." Chief Alexander Grant turned to the officers, his expression hardening. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice low but firm. The taller officer hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "We thought—" "You thought?" the chief interrupted, his tone rising slightly. "Your job isn't to think based on assumptions. Your job is to assess the situation fairly and uphold the law. Did you bother to ask Miss Carter for her side of the story?" The shorter officer shook her head, her voice barely audible as she responded, "No, sir." The chief's eyes narrowed. "This is unacceptable," he said sharply. "Both of you will report to my office first thing tomorrow morning. We'll be reviewing this incident, and disciplinary action will be taken." His words left no room for argument, and the officers nodded meekly, their earlier confidence completely eroded. Turning back to Elena, Chief Alexander Grant, expression softened. Miss Carter, on behalf of the department, I want to apologize. This should never have happened. You deserved better. Elena nodded graciously. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your prompt response. The crowd, still watching intently, began to murmur again, their admiration for Elena growing with every moment. Customers whispered about her poise and determination, some even clapping softly in support. Elena turned to address the room, her voice clear and steady. This isn't just about me, she said, her words carrying a deeper message. This is about addressing prejudice, whether it's in how we manage a store or how we enforce the law. Change starts with accountability. The chief nodded, his expression resolute. You're absolutely right, Miss Carter, and I'll ensure that this incident becomes a learning moment for my team. The tension in the store began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of resolution. Customers who had been passive observers now felt inspired, their admiration for Elena evident in their expressions. As Chief Alexander Grant turned to leave, the officers followed him out, their heads bowed in shame. The incident, though fraught with tension and injustice, had reached a turning point. Elena had not only stood her ground, but had also demanded accountability from those in positions of authority. As the glass doors closed behind the offices, Elena took a deep breath, the weight of the confrontation lifting slightly. The store was quieter now, the earlier chaos replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. Elena wasn't just the owner of the store. She had become a symbol of resilience and justice. Elena wasn't just the owner of the store. She had become a symbol of resilience and justice, a reminder that standing up for what's right could create lasting change. Elena's gaze swept across the store, lingering on the faces of her staff. Some, like Mia Alexander Grant, the young sales associate who had been silently observing the chaos, looked inspired, while others seemed apprehensive, their expressions reflecting the discomfort of realizing they had been complicit, however indirectly, in the toxic environment fostered by their now-fired manager. Elena understood the weight of this moment. What had transpired was not merely a personal confrontation. It was a microcosm of larger systemic issues she had spent her career fighting against. And now, as the owner of the store, she had an opportunity to set things right. Stepping forward, Elena addressed the room, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. Today was a reminder of why I worked so hard to get to where I am. She began, her words cutting through the silence. It's not just about owning a business or achieving success. It's about creating a space where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of how they look, where they come from, or what they're wearing. Her words resonated with the crowd, and a few customers nodded in agreement. One elderly woman standing near the handbag display clapped softly, prompting others to join in. The sound of applause rippled through the store, but Elena raised her hand to quiet them. This isn't about applause, she continued. It's about accountability and change. Elena turned her attention to the employees, focusing on Mia Alexander Grant, who had remained by the jewelry counter throughout the ordeal. Mia Alexander Grant's hands were still clasped tightly in front of her, but there was a new light in her eyes, a mixture of relief and admiration. Elena took a step closer to her, her expression softening. Mia Alexander Grant, Elena said gently, I saw how you handled yourself today. You stayed calm, you observed, and you didn't let the chaos define your actions. That's the kind of leadership we need here. Mia Alexander Grant's eyes widened, her hands flying to her mouth in disbelief. Miss Carter, I don't know what to say, she stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. Elena smiled warmly. Say that you'll accept the position of store manager, she said. I can't think of anyone better suited for the job. The store erupted into applause once again, louder this time, as Mia Alexander Grant stood frozen, overwhelmed by the offer. She had started at the store as a part-time associate, never imagining she would one day have the opportunity to lead. I promise I won't let you down. Mia Alexander Grant finally managed, her voice trembling with emotion. I know you won't, Elena replied, placing a reassuring hand on Mia Alexander Grant's shoulder. This store needs someone who understands what it means to treat people with dignity and fairness. I'm confident you'll bring that to this role. With Mia Alexander Grant's promotion announced, Elena turned her attention back to the gathered employees and customers, Her tone shifted slightly, becoming more authoritative. "Starting today, we're making changes," she said. "This store and every store in this chain will operate under a new set of principles. Respect, inclusivity, and fairness will be at the heart of everything we do." Elena began to outline her vision, painting a picture of a store culture that rejected the prejudice and elitism that had long been associated with high-end retail. She spoke of employee training programs focused on empathy and customer service, ensuring that every team member understood the importance of treating everyone with equal respect. "Luxury," Elena said, "is not just about the products we sell. It's about the experience we create. True luxury is making every customer feel valued." As she spoke, employees nodded, some with renewed enthusiasm, others with a sense of reflection. Elena's words didn't just challenge them, they inspired them. Customers, too, were captivated by her speech, their initial curiosity about the drama now replaced by genuine admiration for the woman standing before them. In the midst of her address, Elena noticed a group of younger employees exchanging glances. One of them, a shy-looking man in his early 20s, tentatively raised his hand. Elena paused and nodded toward him. "Yes," she said, encouraging him to speak. I just wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere, "for standing up for what's right. I've worked here for a year and, well, it hasn't always felt like a fair place. But hearing you today, it gives me hope that things will change." Elena smiled, her resolve strengthening. "They will," she said firmly. "But change doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because of all of us. Together we can make this store a place where everyone, employees and customers alike, feels welcome." The store buzzed with quiet energy as Elena concluded her speech, but she wasn't done. Turning back to the remaining customers, she addressed them directly. "To everyone here today," she said, "thank you for your patience and understanding. I know this wasn't what you expected when you walked through those doors, but I hope you'll leave with the knowledge that this store is committed to being better. We want to earn your trust, not just as a business, but as a community." The applause that followed was the loudest yet, echoing through the store as customers and employees alike showed their support. Elena, however, knew that her work was far from over. Change wasn't just about words, it required action. She resolved to personally oversee the implementation of her new policies, ensuring that her vision became a reality. Later that evening, as the store's lights dimmed and the last customers left, Elena remained behind with Mia Alexander Grant and a few key staff members. They sat together in the break room, going over immediate next steps and discussing how to address the events of the day with the rest of the staff. Elena listened intently to their ideas and concerns, her leadership defined by collaboration rather than command. As she finally prepared to leave, Elena walked through the now quiet store, her steps deliberate. She paused in front of a display case containing the handbag she had admired earlier, a symbol of her childhood dreams. But as she looked at it now, it wasn't just a luxury item. It was a reminder of how far she had come, and of the work still to be done. Elena smiled softly, her reflection in the glass mingling with the image of the bag. Elena smiled softly, her reflection in the glass mingling with the image of the bag. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning.